And second, he's asking, in one sense, a very simple question that everyone would have, all of those devotees would have some answer for. But they immediately sensed that he was looking for a particular answer. And two or three devotees ventured to answer his question. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam raja, the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, give up all forms of religion and just surrender unto me. No, he wasn't looking for that. Okay. Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavanji Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. We wander about throughout the universe, and if a living entity is fortunate, he or she will, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, be able to take up bhakti, the seed of the plant of devotion of bhakti. No, that wasn't the answer either that Prabhupada was waiting for. So like that, different questions or different responses were coming. And they could see that Srila Prabhupada was a little bit, not in a negative sense, but he was a little bit impatient. Like, let's get to the point, and you're all kind of going around the point, but give me what is the real point, what is the essential knowledge of Krishna consciousness. And they all kind of fell silent. And then he said, the essential point is that we are eternal. And the way Prabhupada said it, and the condition that he was in at the time, so much powerfully delivered this message to them. I think none of them who were in that room at the time could forget then and will ever forget that point. We are eternal. And Prabhupada was saying it with complete conviction. Okay, so that's kind of point one, and of course we get this a lot in Bhagavad Gita. So the promise was we'll read Bhagavad Gita, one verse at least. Krishna says in chapter 2, and many of you will be familiar with this, verse number 12. Let me do an invocation first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Says in verse 12 of chapter 2, Na tvevaham jatunasam na tvam nemejanadipa na chaiva na bhavishyama sarve vayam ataparam. Never was there a time when I, Krishna, did not exist, nor you, he's speaking to Arjuna, nor all these kings, there were so many kings present on this occasion, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. How would this translate into Danish? Never was there a time. Okay. When I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future Shall any of us cease to be? Good, thank you. Interesting language, Danish. Interesting also that the same idea can be communicated in different languages. If you think about it, that's kind of an amazing thing. But that's a different subject. Okay, let me read part of what Srila Prabhupada writes in regard to this simple point. He's obviously saying that we, all of us, are eternal just as He, Krishna, the Supreme Bhagavan, is eternal. Prabhupada says, in the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations, according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by His plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. And then he gives the quote he's referring to in the Katha Upanishad, famous one, Nitya Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamat Atmastam Ye Nupashanti Dhiras Tesham Shanti Shashvati Netaresham. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. In other words, they don't really know anything. The Lord says clearly that He Himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their condition and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they do not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality exists in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. All right, Prabhupada says more, but I want to pitch in something here. So this is all very nice, and we may wonder, do I believe this, or do I not believe it? Or do I sometimes believe it and sometimes not? How do I feel, depending on the time of day or the day of the week, whether I believe this or not? The second point that Satchidananda Swami was making in this other lecture on Sunday was that having heard that we are eternal, what do we do about it? And what he was suggesting is then it's a reasonable thing to do is to cultivate one's belief in that truth, in that reality. He didn't elaborate very much on how one might do that, except to say one can read and hear these Vedic literatures, such as Bhagavad Gita. And by hearing, by reading, one can, of course, reflect on what they're saying. And then one may, one's faith, one's belief may become strengthened, something like the exercise of muscles. If you go to the the gym, what do they call it?
Fitness.
Fitness center, yeah. Some of you go to fitness center for exercise. So, by the regular attendance to a fitness center, then one gets some strong muscles, and similarly by regular attendance to such literature as Bhagavad Gita, one gets some spiritual fitness, you could say. Yes, you may say, but getting back to my first question, where are we? You may say, yes, but we live in Denmark. And Denmark is a skeptical country. Am I right?
Yes.
A little bit. Sometimes. Especially these days. So I thought, let's explore skepticism and doubt a little bit. Often when you come here, we're all trying to avoid the subject of doubt. We don't want to doubt something because doubts are compared to demons. I might never get invited back here for the following, but I want to share with you the sorts of doubt that you may have experienced, and if you haven't experienced yet, you will now. And these have been collected from writings of Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher and theologian and scientist from the 17th century, who's famous for his wager. You've heard of Pascal's wager? Haven't heard of Pascal's wager. Pascal set up a kind of argument of why one should believe that God exists. And he set it up as a wager. A wager means a gambling, a bet. So you can say, I wager, I put forward so much money or whatever, that such and such is true. And if I win, then I will get whatever you're wagering, plus I'll get what I have back. And if I'm wrong, then I will lose what I've wagered, and you will win. That's, gambling. So he says, with regard to whether or not God exists, he says, if you really come down to it, our power of reasoning can never decide this. You can never decide whether or not there is God just by our reasoning power. And so he suggests that with our reasoning, one thing we can do is act as if God exists. And if it turns out that we were right, and his kind of assumption is that we'll find out after death, presumably, then we win eternal life. Whereas, if we wager that God doesn't exist, then we lose in all respects. We've lost everything. If we are wrong that God does not exist, but we wager that God exists, we haven't lost anything. Okay, God doesn't exist. No problem. Anyway, that's kind of a footnote to a little series I put together, the notes here. First of all, Pascal suggests there can be uncertainty in all. And then he elaborates, this is what I see, and it's what troubles me. I look on all sides, and everywhere I see nothing but obscurity. You know what is obscurity?
Darkness.
Well, unclarity. Yeah. The opposite of clarity, obscurity. Nature offers me nothing that is not a matter of doubt and disquiet. When I look around, I'm doubtful of everything, he says. on top of that, he suggests, there is bound to be some uncertainty about our purpose as human beings. Have you ever felt like that? What is our purpose? What is my purpose? He says, for after all, what is man or woman, what is human being in nature? A nothing in relation to infinity. All in relation to nothing. A central point between nothing and all. And infinity far from understanding either. Interesting way of describing ourselves. We're somewhere between finitude, between finiteness, between nothingness and between infinity. And we don't seem to have a connection with either one. Well, it gets worse. It gets worse before it gets better. Hold on to your seats. Then there's uncertainty in reason. Because someone may say, well, at least we have our power of reasoning. No, he says, there is nothing so conformable, so you can put in line with, to reason as the disavowal of reason. Okay, I need to translate that. That means there's nothing more reasonable than to doubt reason, the power of reason. It's a very reasonable thing to be doubtful of the power of our reasoning. I think we can agree with that. Well, and he says because of that, and he's speaking already in the 17th century when what now has become called science, in his day was called natural philosophy. But his uncertainty in science, he explains, there no doubt exists natural laws. Okay, there's law of gravity, there's the electromagnetic mechanics and so on. But once this fine reason of ours was corrupted, it corrupted everything. You know the word corrupted? Corruption. So when our fine reason was corrupted, then our science also became corrupted. We can't be sure of anything that we examine with regard to natural laws. Okay, then someone may say, well, then let's fall back on religion. He says, no, there's uncertainty also in religion. And this is what he says, if I saw no signs of a divinity, I would fix myself in denial. I would say, there's no God, because there are no signs of divinity. If I saw everywhere the marks, the signs of a creator, I would repose peacefully in faith. I would say, yes, God is there. Don't you see all the effects, the presence of God? But seeing too much to deny him and too little to assure me, I am in a pitiful state. And I would wish 100 times that if a God sustains nature, it would reveal him without ambiguity. Have you ever felt like that? If only God would reveal himself unambiguously. You know this word? Ambiguous means maybe this, maybe that, not quite sure, maybe some double meaning. What's the Danish word for unambiguous? There's no unambiguous word for unambiguous in Danish. Huh? We got it?
Again?
Louder? Okay.
Utveifelig.
Utveifelig.
Sorry.
Yeah? Okay, that's as close as I can get, sorry. Okay, and then finally, to sort of complete the circle, Pascal says, but there's also uncertainty in skepticism. My guess is the Danish word for skepticism will be skepticismus or something. No? Skepticism. Great, I learned a Danish word today. He said, it is not certain that everything is uncertain. Because skepticism says there's nothing certain. And this says, well, it's not certain that everything is uncertain. So look at the situation we're in. We would say in English, the pickle that we are in. We have reason to doubt all around us. We are swimming in doubt, you could say. You know that your most famous Danish philosopher, theologian, Søren Kierkegaard, had this expression, leap of faith, right? He was saying that faith has to be a kind of leap, not based on a step-by-step reasoning process. It rather comes as a result of a readiness. Well, he's considered one of the founders of what later is called existentialism. But he says faith has to be based on a kind of leap. You have to jump to a conclusion, I believe. Anyway, back to our point that the claim is being made by Krishna that we are eternal. Now, that's on one level reassuring, and on another it could be frightening. But if we take that as a hypothesis, maybe I'm eternal, then the next question is, what do we do with it? First, how do we cultivate that sense of faith? And then, having developed some faith in that idea that I am eternal, that simple point, I am eternal, then the question becomes, what do I do with that? Do I go on living as if I'm not eternal? Do I go on living as if I am this which is so very uneternal, namely this body? And if I do, aren't I making a big mistake? So that's kind of what Krishna is getting at here. It's really about making a very profound change in life, and that's why we don't see big crowds jamming their way into the Hare Krishna temple. You're a very select group because most people don't really want to even begin to think about this issue of who am I and where am I and when am I. Okay, I want to end with, we have about 1 minute, at least the beginning of a very nice song from Bhaktivinoda Thakur within his song collection of Sharanagati. Sharanagati means surrender, right? And he has many songs in this book developing this idea in a very systematic way. And then he has subcategories, and one of these is Atmanivedana, giving oneself completely, because that's really what it's about. If I'm going to act as eternal being, then it really is about giving myself to the supreme eternal. So he puts it like this: Amarami tonata nara rohinu ar Akkana hoino ami kebala tomar. I no longer consider even myself to be mine, O Lord. Now I have become exclusively yours. Ami shobde dahi jiva ahanta charilo adya vimana aji hridaye pashilo. The soul inhabiting this mortal body has given up the false ego attached to the word I. For today, the spiritual sense of being yours has entered my heart. Amar sarvashva deho geho anuchar bhai bandhu dana sutta drabya dvara gar. This one's good. All my possessions, and now he lists possessions. Body, home, servants. Nowadays, we don't usually have servants. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had servants. Brothers, friends, wife, sons, personal belongings, fencing around the house, and gateways. All of these things are now yours, for I have become your servant. I am but a mere occupant in your house. So this answers the question all at one time: who we are, we're a servant; where we are, we're in the house of the Lord. Even if we're not physically here, the whole world becomes the house of the Lord. And when are we? We are in the present moment serving Shishigornita Ki. Thank you all very much. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki. Hare Krishna.